Mine are just
bang bang kiss kiss. It's that way round.
It's like pillow fantasies of the bang bang kiss kiss variety, and I just changed it round to be kiss kiss bang bang. But yeah, I mean, that's Fleming, and he admitted it. But it all sounds right. I mean, what we forget, or what interests me researching this, was that after Casino Royale came out, or as it was about to come out, Fleming did what every debut author does as soon as they know their book's about to be published. You go out and buy a gold-plated typewriter, and then you write a snotty letter to your publisher saying, I demand at least an initial print run of 10,000, which the publisher totally ignores. And I think the print run was 4,000 or something. Yeah. And he did this because he very cleverly taken out a managing director of Collins to dinner and tapped him up to find out what the print run of a Hammond Innes adventure novel was. Oh. And they were saying Hammond Innes sells 40,000 immediately in hardback. Then you have the Book Society versions, and then just at that time, paperbacks were coming in as well. And Fleming was obsessed with this. I mean, Hammond Innes was the target. And it didn't get any better for Fleming because in '55, when he was doing Done Live and Let Die, so whatever the third one was.
Was Thunderball the third one?
No, it was the fourth. Oh, no, it was after. No, it wasn't Dr. No. Diamonds Are Forever, maybe. But whatever it was, the third one came out at exactly the same time that Alistair MacLean wrote HMS Ulysses, which sold 850,000 copies in hardback. You know? And so Fleming must have been out. And it wasn't until the films came that Fleming actually started to outsell people like Hammond Innes.
Wasn't it John Kennedy also saying it?
I'm saying From Russia with
John
Love.
Kennedy was a great help in America to Ian Fleming by saying he read From Russia with Love.
Yeah, but presumably in this book you're dealing with some bestsellers in America who would swallow up Ian Fleming's sales at the time.
Yes, indeed. And they don't. It's interesting how so many serious American writers don't take this era seriously. So somebody like James Lee Burke is writing a kind of state-of-the-nation novel, big operatic, sprawling novel that takes on anger at the US political system. They have bigger fish to fry. In fact, all those...
No, I'm not. I don't go along with that.
Oh, we are? We got our first argument.
Well, no, we're talking about... So I don't regard James Lee Burke as a particularly noir writer.
No, he isn't noir, I agree.
I think we're going to have to accept that he's
we moved on from noir,
yeah.
And,
take that as read.
And if you think of the period when... Again, I want to say, when the period I was looking at, the 50s and 60s mainly, it was boys' books, it was adventure stuff. There were very few women involved, either in the books or as writers. And if you think of Doctor Who starting in the 60s, you know, the sole purpose of an assistant for Doctor Who was to sprain an ankle just when the Daleks were coming. That's all she had to do, running away. I mean,
I remember the Daleks in Doctor Who. Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
I thought you said Doctor No. Daleks and Doctor No.
Similar. It gets awful. It all blends. But that period, there were very few women. What I've said in the introduction was, you know, they just weren't there. They weren't writing this sort of book. Don't forget that exactly the time that Dr. No was For Russia Love were in the cinema, P.D. James and Ruth Reynolds were writing detective stories, their first ones coming out. So the women were writing the crime novel that then eventually overtook.
Indeed.
In the
and also, isn't it interesting, there's a British writer who created the first really serious, persuasive, beautifully rounded female heroine. Who am I talking about? Peter O'Donnell, Modesty Blaze. And when you read, the strip had run for a while and he'd already got those elements in the strip, but the novel you saw this woman totally in command, who was a real survivor. Every situation she's put into, you believe that she and Willie Garvin will survive, because the research is impeccable. So there is a...
There was a fantasy.
They were fantasy.
And there was I think I got it somewhere, they have... Somebody listed all the weapons used by Modesty Blaze and how to kill people.
As the Congo,
from
which is a small...
the Kanga sticks.
Kanga sticks,
yeah,
that's right.
Which is totally, it's like the nunchucks, you know.
Yes.
They're really good if you want to cripple yourself whilst...
Yeah, but she could handle them. Modesty could handle them.
And he always carried at least 3 throwing knives. Yeah, I can't.
But he did take the tropes that Fleming had done
Oh yeah,
And,
that's it. I agree.
Well, you seem to be suggesting that apart from maybe adventure, well, even with adventure thrillers, that thrillers are essentially in that period spy thrillers. Would that be correct?
They became spy thrillers. Yeah.
And then
I
they
mean, there were
dominated the market.
there was the Fleming type. It was Len Dayton who called them spy fantasy, the saving the world job. Now it's a McLean wrote one, the Staten film.
Yeah, but would a Len Dayton or a John le Carré, are they thrillers?
Ah, yes, but different sort. So you had spy fantasy and adventure thrillers, which was man battling the elements as much as a villain.
Yeah.
And then in the 60s, and it was the film of Dr. No which kicked it all off. In that month, in October '62, you not only had the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was really scary, but you had the Beatles, and you had Dr. No, and you had the Inquest File, all within the space of about 2 weeks. And then immediately afterwards, or very soon afterwards, the spy came from the cold. And suddenly there was another sort of spy story, another sort of spy fiction, something like a sort of serious one. And ironically...
And much more thoughtful, which I guess thrillers aren't thoughtful.
And of all the imitators, which I've listed, and I've included Peter O'Donnell and Rusty Blaze, I'm afraid, among them, as imitators of Bond, the people vying for Bond.
She was the female James Bond.
But in a
none
way,
of them have really survived. And the two spy writers who have survived and prospered are Len Dayton and John le Carré, who went against the grain. They didn't do the fantasy superhero stuff.
Before you ask your next question, anybody remember the review? No, nobody in this room is old enough to remember the reviews of Dr. No, the film. They were on the level of this appalling pornographic filth, relishes violence and snobbery. But that was said about the books, wasn't it?
No, that was said about the books.
Said about the books.
Kingsley Amis hated them, but then he ended up writing them.
Yes.
Pauline Kael called the film really good tongue-in-cheek stuff, which doesn't take itself too seriously.
She got it, but nobody else did.
Yeah. But it was that they kicked off. I mean, Len Dayton always said Harry Saltzman and Cubby Broccoli who started the spy craze in the 60s.
But the cruelty of that first film was lost fairly quickly, wasn't it? If you remember that the character played by Anthony Dawson is shot in cold blood by Bond fairly early on. And he says, "You've had your six," and shoots him. That cruel edge of Bond, which is in the books, was gradually, it's come back in the Daniel Craig era. But that cruelty was taken away.
Yeah, Roger Moore would never do that.
Roger Moore didn't do that.
So going back to noir, not noir, have you got a kind of thematic thing here? Are you looking at American crime fiction and finding a continuity among different writers, or are you saying that they're all very different?
I think the main continuity is, and the Americans in the room will agree, is the politics. I mean, American writers saying that. The politics it energizes so much great American fiction and so many American thrillers. Even if it's not on the surface as it is with, say, James Defoe or James Elroy. But there's also this kind of reach that American crime writers have. This is supposed to be Brits versus Americans. They have a wider reach, generally speaking, do they not?
Geographically.
They've got a bigger space.
Not just geographically, I think they take on more issues. So really, John le Carré's books are about and he's a great writer, but they're about the English public school system, the English class system.
Or if you've got a Robert Littell writing the Company or whatever.
The Company, yeah. Which
Or Young Philby.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what about, how do you then say, I mean, what's the political, which I don't buy totally, what's the political angle to what I would regard as classics of noir that were done by people like David Goodis, Jim Thompson?
That's more
Which are not in your books.
They're dead.
Yeah, exactly. So they've got
But they're more...
Oh, that's an easy way.
What can I tell you? The publisher said living authors. I think they're dealing with a dark psychology. They are genuinely noir. So there's nothing more noir than a Jim Thompson novel.
Yes, there's Cornell Woolrich.
But do they not also become thrillers because they're quite pulpy, aren't they? I mean, do they not fit in with they're fast moving in the way that Raymond Chandler said about when he died, get a man comes through the door with a gun.
I would still class them as, because essentially it's still happening in a room rather than on a mountainside. Or in a nuclear submarine. They're crime novels. They're noir crime novels, aren't they? But they are thrilling, certainly.
Who's the nearest to noir? I guess it's James Elroy, is it, in your book?
James Elroy, yes. He is so like... The interview I did with him in London, which was quite interesting, because his publicist... We've got some publicists in this room. His publicist was in a terrible state, because he just chewed up interviewer after interviewer as they walked into the room. He said, "Barry, James Elroy, he's going to tear you apart." I said, "I don't think he will." Because I remember we were born the same year, and he started to talk fairly early about the murder of his mother. He said, "You English critics always bring up the murder of my mother." I didn't. He brought it up. But he's kind of almost like a parody. His books are so black, so dark.